Boomers got to purchase homes for $100,000 that are now worth over $1 million. That's a 10x. A 10x return for generational wealth. The younger generation has the same opportunity right now, but not with real estate. It's with Bitcoin. And specifically, it's with 0.1 Bitcoin. Right now, 0.1 Bitcoin costs about $10,000. That's half the price of a used car. By 2030, if Bitcoin even hits conservative projections, that's going to be worth $50,000 to $100,000. The same return our parents got in real estate. But here's the catch. You realistically have until 2027 to accumulate this. After that, the window closes. There are currently 4.4 million Bitcoin addresses that have 0.1 Bitcoin or more. That's it. Out of 8 billion people, only 4.4 million have 0.1 Bitcoin or more. That's 0.055% of the entire global population. And this is 14 times more rare than being a millionaire. In this video, I'm going to show you why 0.1 Bitcoin is the new wealth building target, why 2027 is your deadline, and here's the part that will shock you. I'm going to show you how institutions are buying at an accelerated pace and it's going to cause a supply shock, and explain what it all means for anybody trying to get to 0.1 Bitcoin in the next 2 years. Let's break it down. I'm Brandon from Green Candle. I break down Bitcoin data and strategies that most people miss. If you want to understand what's actually happening, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss another video from Green Candle. Let's start with why 0.1 Bitcoin is the number that matters. Let's dive into the numbers. 0.1 Bitcoin costs about $10,000 today. That's the same price as half of a used car, a modest family vacation, and what many people spend on their phone over 3 to 4 years. But only 4.4 million Bitcoin addresses hold at least 0.1 Bitcoin. That's 0.055% of the entire global population. Now, compare that to the 62 million millionaires globally and the 2.3 million people with over $10 million in net worth. Owning 0.1 Bitcoin is already 14 times more rare than being a millionaire. So think about that. Right now, getting to $1 million in net worth is 14 times easier than getting to 0.1 Bitcoin. So this is why 0.1 Bitcoin has become the standard. 3 years ago, everyone talked about being a whole coiner, owning one full Bitcoin, but $100,000 per Bitcoin, that's $100,000 in capital. That's out of reach for 99% of people. Then people started talking about 0.01 Bitcoin as the entry point, and it is. 0.01 Bitcoin is $1,000 today. But even if Bitcoin goes to $1 million a coin, 0.01 Bitcoin is only $10,000, and that's not life-changing money for most people. So 0.1 Bitcoin is the new sweet spot. It's still achievable for middle-class incomes, and it's large enough to truly be life-changing, but also small enough that you can realistically get there in 2 to 3 years. So here's the life-changing math. 0.1 Bitcoin is 10 million Satoshis and $10,000 today, just about. So in a conservative scenario, Bitcoin goes to $500,000. That 0.1 Bitcoin is equal to $50,000. That's a new car. That's a down payment in many markets on a new home. Now, for the mid-range scenario, Bitcoin goes to 1 million, which is Michael Saylor's base case by the year 2030. 0.1 Bitcoin is now worth $100,000, and that's a down payment on a house in most major cities. That's paying off entire student loans. That's financial breathing room that most people dream to have. Now, for the bullish scenario, Bitcoin goes to 3 million a coin. That's Kathy Wood's target. 0.1 Bitcoin is now $300,000. That's life-changing for 90% of people. $50,000 to $300,000 is a down payment on a house kind of money, pay off debt kind of money, financial freedom kind of money. That's why 0.1 Bitcoin is the target. It's achievable now, but it won't be for long because institutions just figured this out and they're buying faster than anyone realized. Here's some data that will shock you, and these numbers are so fresh that nobody's talked about it yet. 1 year ago, when Donald Trump was elected, there were 64 publicly traded companies that had Bitcoin on the balance sheet. Bitcoin was also trading at $69,000. Today, in November 2025, Bitcoin is trading at over $100,000, and everybody was freaking out when it crashed just beneath it for only about a few hours. And there's 208 publicly traded companies that now have Bitcoin on the balance sheet. That's a 225% increase in adoption in just 1 year. Let me put this into perspective. In 2023, only 33 companies held Bitcoin. By the end of 2024, there were 64 companies that held Bitcoin. By mid 2025, there was 151 companies that held Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And today, there's 200 that hold Bitcoin on the balance sheet. The acceleration is insane. We're not talking about slow, steady adoption. We're talking about an exponential curve. Let's look at all the companies holding 1,000 Bitcoin. That's $100 million in Bitcoin. At the end of Q1 in 2025, there was 24 companies that held 1,000 Bitcoin or more. And by the end of Q3 of this year, there was 35 companies that held 1,000 Bitcoin or more. That's 46% growth in just 2 quarters. Total corporate holdings right now of publicly traded companies collectively is over 1 million Bitcoin. That's $100 billion worth of Bitcoin at the current price. But here's the stat that makes this a supply crisis. In Q2 2025 alone, public companies bought 134,456 Bitcoin. That's in 1 quarter. How much Bitcoin will be mined in all of 2025, you might ask? Well, that's 164,250. So corporations are buying 82% of annual Bitcoin production in a single quarter. Let me say that again. In just 3 months, corporations bought more Bitcoin than miners will produce in 9 months. The Trump effect is real. Since Trump got elected in November 2024, Bitcoin is up 53% from 69K to 106K, and corporate adoption is up 225%. The US government even created a strategic Bitcoin reserve, and the SEC dropped enforcement cases against 12 different crypto-related companies. I know, crypto. But either way, this regulation is a positive for Bitcoin. So the Trump administration has legitimized Bitcoin at the institutional level, and institutions are responding. You're seeing the ETF tsunami. Bitcoin ETFs launched in January 2024, but here's what happened. Early in 2024, there was 27.8 billion in the ETF assets, and by Q4 of this year, there's nearly 150 billion in ETF assets. That's 5.4x growth in less than 2 years. ETFs now hold 1.5 million Bitcoin. That's nearly 7% of the total supply. Gone forever. Locked in passive investment vehicles that can't sell. On October 21st, 2025, a single day saw $500 million worth of inflow into the Bitcoin ETF. BlackRock and Fidelity, of course, leading that charge. So why this matters for the 0.1 Bitcoin? The total liquid supply on exchanges right now is about 2.14 million Bitcoin. So why does this matter for 0.1 Bitcoin? Well, let's do the math. The total liquid supply on exchanges right now is about 2.14 million Bitcoin, and it's dropping. Corporations are buying 134,000 Bitcoin per quarter. That's 536,000 Bitcoin per year. ETF holdings are at 1.5 million Bitcoin and growing, and one company in MicroStrategy alone has 641,000 Bitcoin at the time of this recording. If just public companies keep buying at the current pace, they'll absorb the entire exchange supply in less than 4 years. But the pace isn't staying the same, it's accelerating. Every Fortune 500 company is watching MicroStrategy's stock performing and thinking, should we be doing that? This is why 2027 is your deadline, because the supply shock isn't coming, it's already here. Now, let me show you the actual numbers and why the supply shocks down by 2027. The total Bitcoin supply is 21 million, but here's the reality. This study from River shows there's about 1.57 million Bitcoin lost. That's 7.5% of the entire supply. Meanwhile, long-term holders have about 10 million Bitcoin. The ETFs have 1.5 million Bitcoin locked in, they won't withdraw. The publicly traded companies now have 1 million Bitcoin, and the exchange supply is only 2.14 million Bitcoin. So this is the only liquid supply, along with the 1.5 million Bitcoin that is left to be mined, but that takes all the way until 2140. So with only 415 mined per day, well, that's 164,250 Bitcoin per year, and corporations buying 536,000 plus per year at the current pace, well, that corporate demand is 3.3 times higher than the total mining supply. That gap has to come from somewhere, and it's coming from the exchanges. And that exchange supply is dying. Since September 2025, exchange reserves have been plummeting. In late October, nearly 7 million Bitcoin moved into profit, meaning holders are not selling, they're hodling. The liquid supply available is also shrinking every single month. 2 million Bitcoin are available on exchanges. That's enough for 20 million people to get to 0.1 Bitcoin. But we already have 4.4 million people at 0.1 Bitcoin or more. And every day, more corporations are buying, there's more ETF inflows, and there's there's more individuals trying to reach zero point 0.1 Bitcoin. So that window is closing. And why it's closing? Well, so that window is closing, and it's closing faster than anyone expected 12 months ago. So why specifically 2027? Let me show you the timeline. We went from 64 publicly traded companies to 208 publicly traded companies in just 1 year holding Bitcoin. That's 144 new companies in just 12 months. If that pace continues, by the end of this year, we'll see 230 publicly traded companies. By the end of 2026, we will see 370 publicly traded companies now holding Bitcoin. And by the end of 2027, we will see 510 companies that have adopted a Bitcoin standard. And each new company that adopts Bitcoin removes the supply from the market permanently. We've only had one that has sold off any Bitcoin. So the corporate buying trajectory keeps shooting up. If corporations maintain the Q2 2025 buying pace of 134,000 Bitcoin per quarter, that means that there's 536,000 Bitcoin bought every single year. So over 3 years, that's 1.6 million Bitcoin removed from corporations alone. And remember, the exchange supply is only 2 million Bitcoin right now. So in 2026, the supply crunch will start to become obvious. Exchange supply will drop below 1 million Bitcoin. That price volatility will increase dramatically. And that zero point 0.1 Bitcoin will cost anywhere from 20 to 30,000. In 2027, that's what will be the breaking point. The exchange supply will potentially fall below that 500,000 Bitcoin. The liquidity crisis will go into full swing, and that zero point 0.1 Bitcoin requires at least $30,000 to $50,000 in capital. And in 2028, with the next Bitcoin halving, that mining rewards gets cut half again, and then there's only 225 Bitcoin mined per day. Well, that supply shock goes into overdrive. So if you can't accumulate 0 0.1 Bitcoin by 2027 at today's prices of $10,000, you'll be trying to accumulate it at 3 to 5x the price with a fraction of the available supply. Today, the average new car costs $50,000. The average used car costs $25,000. Right now, 0 0.1 Bitcoin costs $10,000, less than half a used car. By 2027, 0 0.1 Bitcoin could cost more than a new car. The window is 2 to 3 years maximum. Now, if you're sitting on Bitcoin and you need some capital, you shouldn't need to sell it. This is why I've partnered with Salt Lending. Salt Lending gives some of the best rates in the game, starting at 8.95% with a 12-month duration, and you could borrow up to 70% loan to value. These are simply some of the best rates in the industry. On top of it, they've got a no liquidation solution with Salt Shield that can help you sleep stress-free at night. And they're giving an exclusive offer to Green Candle listeners. So you need to go to saltlending.com/green-candle or the affiliate link down in the show notes today in order to unlock this exclusive offer. So be sure to go to saltlending.com/green-candle today. Now let's break down the roadmap of how exactly you can get to 0 0.1 Bitcoin quicker than you might think. If you have 0 Bitcoin, you can do this in 2 years. With the current price of $100,000, the total cost of about $10,000 to get to 0 0.1 Bitcoin, that's about $417 monthly or just over $100 a week for 24 months. So you can hit that target. Now, if you can't afford that, it sounds like a lot. Well, you'll just have to adjust your timeline. $208 a month, well, that'll take twice as long to get to 0 0.1 Bitcoin. And at $139 a month, that'll take you about 6 years to get to 0 0.1 Bitcoin. The key is just to start now, because by 2027, you'll need $800 to $1,200 a month in order to even reach these levels. So let's think about this in real world terms. $10,000 is less than a used car. It's 20% of a new car, what some people spend on coffee in 3 years, and it's a modest vacation for a family. So you're choosing between a depreciating asset like a car or Bitcoin. Our parents spent $100,000 in order to buy a house that's now worth $1 million. You have the opportunity to buy Bitcoin at $100,000 prices and buy 0 0.1 Bitcoin for $10,000, and that could easily be $100,000 in the next few years. But let's be real, not everyone is going to make it to 0 0.1 Bitcoin. What happens if you don't? Well, if you get to 5 million Satoshis or 0.05 Bitcoin, if Bitcoin goes to $1 million, that's $50,000. That's not necessarily life-changing money, but it's meaningful wealth. That's a decent car. That's an emergency fund. It matters. If you just get to 0.01 Bitcoin, that's 1 million Satoshis. At $1 million a coin, that's $10,000. $1,000 is not nothing. It's also not game-changing for your life dramatically. It's a nice bonus, but not financial freedom. And let's face it, if you don't start at all, this is the worst outcome possible. Spend the next 3 years watching Bitcoin go from 100K to 300,000 plus. Corporations accumulate millions of Bitcoin and you have zero Satoshis. You watch that zero point 0.1 Bitcoin go from $10,000 to $30,000 and you're priced out forever. Here's the harsh reality. Most people won't hit the zero point 0.1 Bitcoin. Not because they can't afford it, but because they hesitate and wait for a dip that never comes. They start but don't buy consistently. They panic sell. They get distracted by altcoins and meme coins. And they convince themselves that I'm too late. So those people who make it to zero point 0.1 Bitcoin by 2027 are the ones that are going to start immediately. They're never going to sell even with those 40% drawdowns, and they ignore all the noise. It's simple, but it's not easy. Now, let's compare this to real estate. Remember when I said that earlier? Boomers bought houses for $100,000 that are now worth $1 million. But not every boomer bought a house. Many said that it's too expensive and they're going to wait for a dip. And then they never did. They watched their friends build generational wealth while they stayed on the sidelines. So don't be that person with Bitcoin. 208 companies have figured it out, and they're buying more than miners can produce. The question is, will you figure it out before the supply is gone? And if you're stacking Bitcoin to get to that 0.1 Bitcoin, you need to get your Bitcoin off exchanges. That's where Trezor comes in. Every month you hear about exchanges getting hacks, accounts frozen, platforms going bankrupt, Mt. Gox, FTX, Celsius. The list keeps going. With exchange reserves dropping and supply drying up, you can't risk having your Bitcoin on an exchange. Trezor is one of the most trusted hardware wallets, and they just released the best hardware wallet in the Trezor Safe 7. So get your Bitcoin off exchanges in cold storage because not your keys, not your coins. So if you're serious about reaching 0.1 Bitcoin and keeping it there for years, get yourself a hardware wallet and go to the affiliate link in the description. And once you have your hardware wallet, you need to back up your seed phrase. Paper isn't good enough. House fires, floods, accidents happen. Crypto steel is a fireproof, waterproof, crush-proof backup for your seed phrase. Stainless steel. Your seed phrase etched in metal that survives anything. You're building life-changing wealth. $10,000 today could be worth $100,000 by 2030. So protect it properly with the crypto steel. You could go to cryptosteel.com/greencandle today and use promo code greencandle for 10% off your entire order. The best part of this is that they have a great tamper seal. So you know if anybody has meddled with your seed phrase, and it's the only metal backup in the game that has anything like this. So I strongly recommend using crypto steel to get your. So here's the final takeaway. 0.1 Bitcoin is equal to 10 million Satoshis, which is just about $10,000 today. Only 4.4 million people have 0.1 Bitcoin or more. That's only 0.055% of the entire global population. And it's 14 times more rare than being a millionaire. But here's what's changed over this past year. Corporate adoption has exploded 225% from 64 companies to 208. On top of it, ETFs have locked up 1.5 million Bitcoin alone. That's nearly 7% of the entire supply. Meanwhile, the exchange supply is shrinking, and these reserves are plummeting. By 2027, the window to accumulate 0.1 Bitcoin at reasonable prices closes. And after that, you're competing for a supply that's dwindling. So the playbook is easy. Just DCA what you can to try to get there as quickly as possible. $417 a month per month for 2 years can get you there. That's less than the average car payment. It's what many people spend dining out. And it's less than a gym membership plus all these streaming services everybody pays for. So you're choosing between consuming now or building wealth for the future. That's life-changing potential. So if Bitcoin reaches these conservative targets of 500,000 to 1 million, that 0.1 Bitcoin can be worth 50 to 100,000 real quick. Boomers had real estate, Gen X had tech stocks, millennials and Gen Z have Bitcoin, but only if you act when the window's open. You have until 2027. 208 companies figured it out. Will you? If you want a lot more videos on the Bitcoin supply and how it's dwindling, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button for me. I track these numbers so you can make informed decisions, so make sure you hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you think. I've also got 2 great videos that you guys can check out right here following this one. Thank you guys for joining me, and I'll see you on the next one.